Hey guys, so today we're continuing my series where I share some tips for repurposing your makeup products, and today we're focusing on blush. So if you've ever tried to use up a blush, you probably know that it takes forever. So hopefully these tips can help you find some new ways to use them if maybe you're trying to go through your blushes in a project pan, or even if you just have a blush in your collection that you don't really like for its intended purpose. This might give you some ideas for other ways to use it so that it doesn't go to waste. My first tip might sound kind of weird, but it might actually be really useful for a lot of you, and that would be to use your blush as a color corrector. And this probably would be best to do with a liquid or cream highlighter. Now, color correcting is a technique where you definitely want to make sure to pay attention to the undertones, and this is probably something that would mainly work for your under eyes. A lot of people will use like a peachy or salmon toned color corrector for the under eyes to kind of cancel out any dark circles or discoloration. And it's going to really depend on what kind of undertone your dark circles are. So a good way to check what kind of undertone you'd want to look for would be to look at the color wheel. If your dark circles are more like on the purpley side, then the opposite side of the color wheel is yellow. So something more like yellowy or like a yellow peach might work best for you, whereas if you have more like blue dark circles, then the opposite side of the color wheel of that is orange. So of course, your skin tone and the tone of your dark circles is much more nuanced than just like blue or purple. For a lot of people, like a pinky salmony color works really well. One example of a blush that I think would work well if you're looking for like kind of an orangey peach type of color would be like the Flower Blush Balm in Pinched. If you have a skin tone similar to mine, this is one that I have tried before, and I focus it in on kind of like the inner part of my under eye, and I do feel like it helps to kind of cancel things out a little bit. You could layer this under your concealer, or you could mix it in with your concealer, but it's something to play around with and just kind of experiment with. Maybe try it out on a day where you're like not going anywhere, or play around like before you wash your face for the night just to see like what would work. And actually the same thing works vice versa. If you have a color corrector that you don't like to wear under your eyes, you might be able to use it as a blush, especially if it's like a peachy salmony kind of color. Alright, one of my favorite ways to repurpose a blush is to wear it as an eyeshadow, specifically when I'm wearing that same blush on my cheeks. So today I did this with the CoverGirl Cheekers blush in Natural Twinkle. I actually hit pan on this blush today. I have this on my cheeks today, and once I finished up with my eye look, I just took this same blush on a fluffy crease brush. I think I used the BK Beauty 201, but any fluffy crease brush will work. And I just fluffed that right above my other crease colors. And I love how that just ties together the whole look. It really makes the look so cohesive. I have found that using my blush as an eyeshadow definitely helps me go through them faster. So if you are having trouble finishing up a blush, I would highly recommend using it as an eyeshadow because you'd be surprised how much faster you might be able to go through it. Alright, my next tip might also sound kind of strange, but hear me out. So this especially applies to anyone with very like pinky undertones, but if you have any foundations in your collection that are maybe too light for you or too yellow or neutral for you and you need to adjust them to better match your like pink undertone, you could try mixing just a tiny little bit of your blush to kind of customize the shade and make the undertone more pinky. And you know, blushes can range in undertone, of course, just like any other makeup product. But let's say you have cool undertones, then you'd want to go for a cooler blush, versus if you have more like a neutral but still kind of pinky undertone, then, you know, choose that same type of blush. Again, this is another one that's probably going to work best with a liquid blush, but you could also try it if you have any like loose powder blushes. You could also easily mix that in with a foundation. And this is another one where you're probably going to want to experiment, do a little trial and error to see what actually works well for you. But just another tip to try out. I know it might sound kind of strange, but I think it could really work, especially if you have very like cool pink undertones and you have a hard time finding foundations that match you. My next tip is another great one for loose powder blushes specifically, and you can turn any pressed powder blush into a loose powder as well by just like crushing it up really finely. But if you tend to prefer cream blushes, you can turn a powder blush into a cream blush by just mixing it with some moisturizer. Especially if you have a loose blush but you find that you never reach for it because loose blushes can get kind of messy and just tricky to work with. this will be a great way to turn that into a slightly more user-friendly blush. Tip number 5 is to play around with some different blush techniques. There's so many ways that you can switch up your blush placement and that can totally change the shape of your face. A couple of my favorites to play around with are blush draping and the sunburnt blush look. I have been really into that technique lately. I did that today. I think the key with the sunburnt blush is to keep it away from the tip of your nose, unless you like that look, but if you tend to find that like putting blush on your nose makes you look sick or like you have a cold, just stick to like the bridge of your nose, where if you had a slight sunburn, that's where the sun would naturally kind of fall, and just kind of the tops of the cheeks. I've been really into wearing my blush up a little bit higher than I used to, dusting it onto my forehead as well. Lauren May Beauty has a great video on blush draping, which is another technique where you almost use the blush to contour your face rather than using a contour. You can experiment with just wearing the blush like lower on the apples of your cheeks or higher up, kind of like the 80s blush trend. There's so many fun ways to play around with your blush besides just using it the way that you normally do, like just right here on your cheeks. And finally, my 6th tip is to wear it as a lip color. So you're gonna wanna lay down a lip balm to start out, and then you can just take that blush on your finger or on like a lip brush or even like a flat shader brush that you would normally use for eyeshadow, and just dab it onto your lips. It kind of gives you like a nice blotted lip effect. A lot of cream blushes also work great as just like a tinted lip balm. You don't even need to lay down a balm first, because cream blushes naturally have more of a balmy texture. You can wear those as a lip product. Obviously, you know, some products aren't technically lip safe, so just keep that in mind, you know, play around at your own risk. If you've got like a super old blush that you don't feel comfortable using on your mouth, then that's different, but there are also a lot of stick blushes that even say that you can use them on your lips anyway, so that I've had a lot of fun with as well. But those are my 6 tips for repurposing your blush. I'm having so much fun with this series. It really just goes to show that makeup products can be used in so many more ways than just their intended purpose, what they're labeled as. So I hope this gave you some ideas and some inspiration. If you have any tips for repurposing a blush, definitely leave them down below. I'm sure everyone else would love to hear those as well. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you're into this type of content, and hopefully I will talk to you again very soon in my next video. Bye!